Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and today we're going to talk about human relations and human resources theory of organizational communication. Let's begin. All right, so we're going to explore the Hawthorne studies and also talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how it pertains to theory X and theory Y. We're also going to talk about how the human relations approach was inadequate and misuse and how these problems led to human resources approach. So if you remember the last chapter, we had the classical management theories, and they were based on the industrial age, mechanics, machines, if you will. But humans are not machines. We require rewards and we require care and we require camaraderie. So we're going to explore how we went from this machine industrial age point of view to a more human relations theories, human resources theories that we see today. And then we're going to also explain how the managerial grid and the system management system describes human resources management. Talk about, and then of course we're going to encap the chapter on the communication patterns in classical human relations and human resources organizations. And talk about the challenges of instituting human relations principles in today's organizations. All right, so we have the Hawthorne studies, and we're trying to figure out how to maximize worker output and improve organizational efficiency. Remember the last time we talked about how we went from family businesses, artisans to factories, and we're trying to figure out how do we have all these people and how do we organize them together to help complete or to help achieve the goals of the organization. So now we're continuing on with that tradition, but there are some really exciting findings during these times. All right. So there are four major phases. Sorry. There were four major phases of these studies. First, you have the illumination study. So it was to determine the influence of lighting level on the workers' productivity. Then the relay assembly room test studies to better understand productivity, increases seam and then illumination studies. So when you think about the initial Hawthorne studies, they were trying to figure out how did dimming the lights, making the lights brighter, did that have any impact on, excuse me, did that have any impact on increasing or decreasing productivity at all? Then we have the interview program to gather data of why the lighting or why it increased productivity. And the bank wiring system. So the final series of investigations involve naturalistic or just non-experimental observations. So they just had the workers do their thing and they gathered data that way. All right. So the Hawthorne studies, here are some of the results. The worker output increased result of attention the researchers paid to the workers. So you might have heard of the Hawthorne effect before, but with this effect, the behaviors of participants change because there's someone watching them versus if they weren't being watched, they might have not behaved that particular way. The worker output was increased through working through informal social factors. Management style can explain some of the observed productivity changes, and it can be explained as a function of human social factors and satisfaction of workers' human needs. So, like I said before, we're transitioning with these studies. It was groundbreaking because it wasn't just like, okay, well, if we just pay them more, they will produce more output, right? We want more intrinsic rewards. Do we have belonging in the organization? Do are we being observed and how are we being observed? Does that change productivity and behavior as well? which leads to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. So you might have heard this in other places. For example, I talk about this in many areas, such as my interpersonal communication classes and my intercultural communication classes. I also was introduced to this in my psychology courses. I'm a psychology minor, so we might have heard this around. So here's how it can apply to organizational communication. So with the hierarchy of needs, we have the triangle and we have the lower order needs, physiological safety and affiliation, and the higher order needs, esteem and need for actualization. So don't be fooled by the lower order needs as far as being lower. That doesn't mean that they're not important. If you notice in the book, the base is the most prevalent, right? So for example, in order for me to have high self-esteem or be my best self in my self-actualization phase, I have to make sure that I eat. I have to make sure that I sleep well. I have to make sure that I'm able to breathe. So these are physiological needs that have to be met first before safety needs being met. So I have to make sure that I can do what I need to do as a living organism. It has to be in a safe place because if I'm in danger, then I can't talk about affiliation needs. My affiliation needs would be my needs to belong in a group, to have a sense of community. And then now that I have a sense of community, I can work on self-esteem and making sure that I am comfortable with myself. And then once all of those are met, I can be my highest self. So so that's the explanation of hierarchy of propensity. The most important is at the bottom, and or at least you can't necessarily have one. You can't have the upper levels without meeting the base levels of the pyramid first. All right. So let's talk about McGregor's theory X and theory Y. Now, when we think about managerial styles, we were introduced to the more colder, mechanical, like I'm the boss, you're the employee, and that was like the zeitgeist at the time. Whether it be parenting, whether it be politics, and whether it be work, the society was way more hierarchical than we are today. So theory X represents the manager influenced by most negative aspects of classical management theories. So with these type of managers, they think that they are by nature indolent and work as little as possible. They lack ambition, are lazy, self-centered, resistant to change, gullible, not very bright. But if you think about where this came from, the workers were cogs in the machine. You don't care about the spring in a mattress, or you don't care about the well, we care about the brakes, but we don't care. We care if the brakes work. We don't care about the feelings of the brakes. What I'm getting at is that idea of okay, these cogs in the machine are only here to work to make the organization work. Their feelings and their abilities, other than doing the tasks that they were handed to them, are necessarily in consideration at all. But then we have theory Y. You have to make sure to understand that these are human beings, with their own goals and aspirations, and they have families. They may want to move up the ladder. They may need intrinsic rewards. They need to feel like they are part of something bigger. Think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs: esteem, affiliation, self self-actualization. So with the assumptions of theory Y, it believes, or they believe, that physical and mental work is natural. So we are built to produce and we are built to not just produce, but to build and to create meaning in our lives through work. People exercise self direction and self control in service of objectives to which they are committed. So notice we say to they're committed. So think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is not just like, oh, I need to work to get a check, that we will have more devoted employees if we are committed to one goal. If I believe in the mission statement of my company, if I believe that the work that I do is for the greater good instead of just being a cog in the machine. Commitment to the objection is a function of rewards associated with their achievements. So moving up the ladder, getting actual awards, maybe getting further education so they can do their jobs more effectively. Those are some awards outside of the paycheck that can help motivate employees. And then the average human learns under proper conditions not only to accept but to seek responsibility. So again, when we think of theory Y versus theory X, the theory X management, they're like, oh, well, they don't want to move up, or they might have somebody else move up from the outside versus internal moving up within an organization because they weren't that bright anyway. But with Theory Y, they might be like, hey, under proper conditions, if we help grow and mold our employees, they can move within our company and seek responsibility. They're not just cogs in the machine anymore. They are an important part of organizational goals. All right. So the capacity to exercise a relatively high degree of imagination, ingenuity, and creativity in solving organizational problems is widely distributed among the population. Under the conditions of modern industrial life, the average human being only uses a part of their intellectual potentialities. So if we help mold and if we help cultivate their talents, it might be useful to not only their growth, but the company's growth as well. Human relations approach like the family metaphor. So you might have heard this saying before, or maybe even backlash to this particular train of thought. We are not just workers, but we're a family. Human relations theories prioritize human beings and their satisfaction through the workplace of interactions and managerial choices. So it's a combination. Organizational goals are a team effort, not just based on the managerial choices, but how workers are treated and respected in the workplace. All right. So, with those Hawthorne studies, it's shifted the focus from classical to human relations schools, and there was no defining event, but I mean, when we think about it, we are more than just workers in an organization. We have goals too, and they show that hey, if we're treated like human beings, we will increase productivity. It's a win-win. So here's the flow chart of human relations principles: increase work factors, satisfaction of higher order needs, such as, excuse me, such as esteem and self-actualization, with increased job satisfaction and productivity. But there were some challenges. There might have been some superficial adoption of theory Y behaviors, so it was a good start, but we want to make sure that, hey, we're getting input from our employees as we create these changes. And there might be a discrepancy between beliefs and behaviors because if these managers grew up or came up with theory X behaviors, it will be a little bit more difficult for them to automatically switch to Y. We want to shift from human relations to human resources. We want to have meaningful participation throughout all different parts of the organization and empowerment through support. So, in order for us to motivate our employees, organizations develop the attitude of we need to be there for them, help with training them, make sure that we are treating them with respect. So let's talk about the managerial grid and the Likert system. All right, put myself down here. All right, so let's talk about the 5 managerial styles. We have first have impoverished management when we have no concern for people and no concern for production and little care for organizations and employees. So similar to the theory X we were talking about, Then we have country club management, which sounds nice. We have high concern for people, but low concern for production. So that sounds nice initially, but in order for the workplace to exist, the business itself needs to exist. So we definitely need to have a higher concern for production. It's all about balance. Then we have authority compliance. So we have a high concern for projection and low concern for people, similar to Theory X. We maximize efficacy to obtain goals, but have little concern for human needs. So you might have higher turnover from these jobs, maybe a lower reputation as far as like, oh, you don't want to work at this particular job because you don't treat their employees well. So there's some consequences to that as well. But then we have team management. So we have high concern for production and people, and goals are achieved with independent action, committed, talented, and satisfied employees, which is all well and good. This is what we aim for, but it's harder to do because you might have outside factors that impact the business or impact the organization. We have to deal with personalities and make sure everybody's on board. So although this is really great to aim for, it might not be the easiest to do, but it's good to aim for. And then we have middle of the world. So we have the balance concern for people and production. So like team management, it's easier to say in a class or on paper, but it's harder to balance that out when we have other factors that are concerned. All right, so I'm gonna move myself over. I'm gonna move myself a lot. All right, so this is the managerial grid and what it looks like. We have the degree, we have concern for people on the y-axis, and on the x-axis concern for production. So we're trying to enhance organizational efficacy and effectiveness and stimulate the satisfaction and creativity of workers. So we can be middle of the road or team management, probably a happier medium. Country club management sounds great at first. One organization that comes to mind would be Google. So, for example, in the early days of Google, they were a smaller company. The workers were treated like family. They were part of a new niche part of the internet. But now, as the company grew, they had to have an increased conservative production. Not to say they don't take care of their people, but especially in recent years and after the pandemic, a lot of the perks are gone, such as, oh, a bunch of free lunches. And we have masseuses on board. They had a new CEO and then they kind of changed their tune. Not to say they're not a great company to work for, but a lot of the country club management styles and all the perks of the earlier days kind of got rolled back to a more traditional management style. Then we have the Likert system. So the four organizational forms differ based on the following factors: motivation, communication, decision making, goal setting, control, influence structure, and performance. So let's check them out over here. Oops. Now I keep moving myself. I need to find a blank space. Oops, excuse me. All right, so we have systems 1 through 4. And the first system is the exploitative authoritative organization. Motivations are through fear, downward accurate communication, and top level control. So people might not like working at these companies. They kind of rule with the iron fist, but with these types of systems, the hierarchy is there. You don't necessarily get a lot of down or bottom tier employees talking to the top. Very high level control on top. And then we have benevolent authoritative organizations. So the motivation is to economic rewards, still limited communication. So it's a little bit better than System 1, but still has that top level of control. Then we have consultative organization. So the decisions are still made at the top and upper level. So it's not just a couple of people, it's just a couple more people that make the decisions. And employees are consulted through communication, and there's movements of communication up and down the hierarchy. So although people in the bottom of the hierarchy of the pyramid, they don't make decisions, they're at least informed and consulted, not just told what to do. And management takes that feedback into consideration when making decisions. And then finally, participative organization. Probably more suited for more smaller organizations, but decision making controls performed by every organizational member, all around communication, and members are valued. So with smaller companies, because there's a lot less people, a lot less hierarchy, it's a lot easier to have a system for type of organization, and maybe more bureaucratic organizations or organizations where order is more important than the, I don't want to say happiness, but the economic ego of their of their employees. More bureaucratic systems might fall under this is 1 or 2. So when we think about different types of organizations, think about some examples that can be in 1 through 4. All right. Okay. So cool part about Table 3.1 is that we can see the classical human relations and human resources approach and compare and contrast. So, for example, with the classical approach, communication type is task related, human relations approach is task and social, and then human resources approach is task, social, and innovation. We have downward vertical communication, human relations approach, or vertical and horizontal. And then the human resources approaches is all directions, so bottom up, side to side, and top to bottom. And classical approach, because now not only a few people are making decisions, usually written down, more formal communication styles, human relations, face to face, a little bit more informal, so more informal. And then human resources approach, all channels, but both, especially informal. So let's talk about human relations and human resources organizations. So let's talk about the different types of communication. Just like the table, we're comparing the direction of communication flow. Can you talk to the higher ups? Can the higher up, does the higher ups or the people in the top of the organization, do they allow people in the bottom of the organization to talk to them? In classical organization, no. So we have that vertical flow going downward. Then human relations approach, we have the vertical inflation and added emphasis on the horizontal communication, meaning people in the same tier of the organization as far as power and expertise, they can talk to each other. And then interaction and communication flows horizontally among employees. So different communication channels might focus on face-to-face. With human relations approach, they might do surveys, they might talk to employees, they might do employee evaluations, and making sure they have on record how their employees feel and how their employees doing, and they're going to talk about how they can improve or help the employee experience. It allows for immediate feedback and more consideration of nonverbal cues, and is more appropriate for addressing human needs emphasized in the human relations approach. So we're treating people as people with their own needs and goals, and how we can reconcile both individual goals and organizational goals together for the sake of the organization. A human relations organization wants to break down the status differential between managers and employees. Now, there still are differences in power, but they do this by having less focus on titles, formal business title, former business attire, and bureaucratized language. So, making sure that we have both formal and informal communication to break down those barriers. So, how do we see these types of organizational theories play out today? Let's see what's up down here. All right. So we have learning organizations. So we have the emphasis on mental flexibility, team learning, a shared vision, and personal mastery. One assignments I'll have you do is to take a look at an organization. And when you take a look at those organizations, I want you to think about the vision and mission of the organization. And also think about, because this is where you may want to work one day, think about what that vision looks like for you and would you want to help the organization in that vision. So promoted to the workplace through participation in dialogue. So a lot of these values are in their hiring materials, they're in their commercials, so the public knows they value these things. Is also within the organization. I used to work for Disney, so it reminded me of some of the ways where being a not necessarily a family, but we used to be called cast members instead of employees, guests instead of customers. We had this shared vision of making magic. There you go, making magic for the guests. I have to remember it's almost 20 years ago, but because of that shared vision, that's even though we had our own individual jobs, we were to make magic for our guests. Then we have the knowledge management. So we view organization as a cycle of knowledge, creation, development, and application. So what innovations do we see? Do we have feedback? Is there something that's inefficient? Okay, how do we change it? We have people on the ground making sure, or they deal with the everyday task. So what do they think we can do to improve it? How can we make their working conditions better? How can we make it better for our stakeholders, such as customers, such as people who interact with the organization? So it emphasizes, so even though this is more time consuming, this emphasizes coordination and collaboration within and across teams. Oops, excuse me. Sorry. The what of human resources programs. So they emphasize team management and employee involvement, establish knowledge-enabled organizations. So we grow research within organizations, we form teams, collect data together, the utilization of collective knowledge for achieving high performance. So there's an emphasis of learning, not just, oh, you do task and you are a cog in a machine. No, we are collaborating for the organizational goals. What are we learning from this? What kind of expertise do we have? How can we help further your education to help with your personal goals and the goals of the organization? What kind of training can we give you? Then the importance of enhancing product and service quality and organizational productivity and fostering a culture of collaboration and continuous learning. And the how. So we know when team-based management is appropriate. Sometimes we need, especially during a crisis, top-down management. So this doesn't work in all situations. And then we need to consider the attitudes of top management. So considering on who is in that leadership role, just like we have our X and Y managerial styles, we might have one tenure of management that believes in these human resources initiatives and some that don't. You have to deal with cynicism change too. So change isn't easy, especially for tenured employees that have been there. So we have to make sure to have buy-in from those established employees and then facilitate the translation process, make sure everyone understands what's going on and the reasons for change in the organization. So in summary, now we know about the Hathor studies and how they prove to be a springboard in human relations reports. So we're getting away from industrial revolution, humans are machines. We're only concerned about the organization and view them as people. Then we're introduced to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or we're introduced to the hierarchy of needs and how it intersects with theory X and theory Y. Are we dealing with the motivations of people? And how can we use the motivations of people to help us become a stronger and better organization? We talked about how the human relations approach was inadequate and misused in some ways. Some people couldn't implement it very well, maybe implemented it superficially, maybe transitioning from a theory X to theory Y manager was just too jarring. So within managerial grid, it talks about different aspects of human resources management and how some companies prioritize productivity over people, the satisfaction of their employees. Sometimes they might emphasize satisfaction too much and sacrifice productivity. So we're trying to get that just right Goldilocks type of situation that helps both the organization and its employees. You want to be able to describe a typical communication pattern in classical human relations and human resources organizations. So there's different types of patterns. We have the more direct, more formal, and top down of classical. We have human relations where we're able to have both up, down, and vertical. Then human resources has an all around approach to communication. And then just appreciate the challenges of instituting human resources principles in today's organizations. It's not an easy approach, but it is effective in honoring the people who work there. People who do feel they're a part of a mission tend to be more productive. So let's see. All right. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. If you have any questions, please let me know and take care. Bye, everyone.